against the belligerents initiated against the Islamic Republic of Iran. It is a message that our people are one voice, one hand, one bloc. The key message of my word here is that one of his speeches, the United States President said Iran must completely give up and surrender. Then the issue is not our nuclear endeavors, yet our surrender. However, these words are much bigger than the U.S. President himself. Iran is a deep-rooted empire, deep-rooted in history, with well-established civilization. That's why the word surrender is not within our vocabulary. The Iranian people mocked the words uttered by the U.S. President. Since the victory of the Iranian revolutions, the West, namely the United States, maintained animosity against Iran under many false pretexts. Sometimes they came up with, under the guise of human rights, women's rights. Now they are coming with other pretexts about our civil nuclear endeavors. Their ultimate goal is to see Iran surrendering. Former U.S. President did not publicly utter such words. Simply, these words are not acceptable at the global legal level. No president has the right to demand one sovereign people to surrender. The Iranian cannot and will not surrender. This is a key point in my message. Let the Iranian people know that the United States have deep-rooted animosity with Iran and the Iranian people, and they want us to surrender. This cannot and will not happen. Iran is mighty, established with deep civilization, deep-rooted in history, vast geography, and established culture, manifold bigger than the United States civilization. No one could imagine that Iran or the Iranians could surrender. Preposterous this is. Demanding Iran or the Iranian to surrender would bring about nothing but mockery. Iran and the Iranian people are dignified and will remain standing tall by the grace of God the Almighty. And I pray to God Almighty to bestow blessings and grace upon our beloved homeland and our people. And may God have mercy on the Supreme Leader Khamenei. May he rest in peace.
Surrender. Iran will not surrender. A message from its Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei appearing in a video message broadcast on state television, his first message since the end of the Israel-Iran war. The Supreme Leader congratulated the Iranian people for what he says is their victory over the United States, saying it had delivered a, quote, hard slap to America's face. He said they failed to destroy the Iranian nuclear program And he went on to say that the U.S. entered the war to prevent the complete destruction of Israel. Let's bring in Rasul Sardar in Tehran, who was listening to that message with us here on Al Jazeera. So the first statement by the Supreme Leader since the end of the war, bring us the highlights. What stood out for you there?
Well, this was his first public appearance after the ceasefire. And indeed, today, when I was talking to Iranians, many of them wondering about his whereabouts. And now we have seen that now they've released a video speech of Khamenei. It was not a live one. However, it had some significant messages here. First, of course, the congratulations over Iranians' victory over Israel. And the second one, he claims that this is a victory over the U.S. as well, and also congratulating the Iranian nation showing such a unity in a hard time. But the focus of his speech was on the armed forces, because many claims across the world and in Iran as well that the Iranian army has received a huge blow from the Israeli attacks. However, he says that the Iranian army was capable of targeting military and non-military positions in Iran and has caused severe damage across the Zionist entity, Israel, what he meant. And he says that if Israel attacks us again, they will see a further destruction.
Right.
And he is also praising again and again the armed forces, the armed personnel, and so on. And he's saying that Israelis claiming that they got a victory over Iran is just a matter of the mockery for Iranians. And he also has focused on the messages that are coming from the USA, particularly the President of the United States, Donald Trump, that they have claimed that they have destroyed completely the Iranian nuclear facilities. Now, Iranian Supreme Leader is saying that they caused significant damage.
Right.
However, our nuclear program is still in place, and the claims that are coming from the United States are false, and he's saying that Iran is going to continue with its nuclear program.
Okay,
also,
Rasul, let's pause and just pick up on all of this, because he did say quite a lot. And before we go into more detail about the nuclear program, I wanted to ask you first about his claim of victory over Israel, and he also praised unity among Iranian people. How are Iranian people reacting to the outcome of the war before we get to the nuclear part?
Well, I think there are mixed messages here. So since yesterday on, I have been talking to several Iranians right after the ceasefire was announced. So there is a clear sense of relief here. We're seeing that more and more people are now coming back to the capital. Indeed, yesterday we have seen thousands and thousands of cars coming from the northern cities heading toward Tehran. However, on the other hand, there is a sense of anxiety, a common anxiety among the Iranian people here as well, because they believe that this was only the first wave of the war. Now it's ended, it's over by the announcement of the ceasefire. However, they say, well, one thing was clear. Yes, Iran has a certain capacity of deterrence, but on the other hand, many are questioning the capacity or the efficiency of the Iranian air defense systems. And now they're saying that as the efficiency of the Iranian air defense system is not that much high caliber, they believe that the second wave of the attacks could come from Israel, even from the United States, as Iran is extremely vulnerable to the air attacks.
Okay. Now, on the nuclear program, what does its future look like? The Supreme Leader, in his message there, said they attacked our nuclear facilities and this matter cannot go unpunished. What did he mean by that, do you think?
Indeed, he said that it cannot go unpunished, but I was listening to him carefully, whether that is going to be a military threat or not. He said Iran is going to pursue this issue in the international venues. So that means Iran is planning to deal with it diplomatically, but as of now, Supreme Leader didn't threaten Israelis or Americans by any military actions that could come out of Iran. That is quite clear. However, on the other hand, when we're talking about the nuclear facilities, now the Supreme Leader of Iran is saying that largely its nuclear program is still in place and it's not completely destroyed, on the contrary of the statements that are coming from the United States. But today, there has been another remarkable development in Iran. one day after the Iranian parliament passing a bill suspending all the cooperation with the International Atomic Energy Agency. Now, today, the Guardians Council, which is the ultimate body to approve or disapprove any bills coming from the parliament, has approved the suspension of the cooperation. And that means now this is a binding law in Iran. It means from now on, Iran is not going to share any details, any of its nuclear activities with the world's atomic energy agency. That means Iran's nuclear program is going completely dark.
Okay, Rasool, thank you very much for bringing us the latest there from Tehran. Rasool Sedar. Now, European Union leaders are meeting in Brussels for talks on a range of topics, which will include, no doubt, Iran, the war on Ukraine, Gaza, and U.S. tariffs. The gathering follows Wednesday's NATO summit in The Hague, where leaders agreed to increase defense spending. An 18th round of sanctions against Russia is also up for discussion. Hashem Ahelbara is in Brussels for us and is joining us now. What are we expecting EU leaders to say on Iran, Hashem?
They're basically going to decide what should happen next as far as the crisis in the Middle East is concerned fully. I just spoke with senior members here at the EU and they said Iran is topping the agenda and the EU leaders are trying to figure out what happens next, particularly off the back of the meeting which is scheduled to take place next week between the Americans and the Iranians. The view here in Brussels is that there needs to be a new agreement between the International Atomic Energy Agency and Iran, along with the United States of America, that states clearly that Iran has no right to have nuclear weapon, but there could be a compromise on what they can offer the Iranians in the near future. The only big fear here is that the ceasefire agreement collapses, leading to a prolonged conflict in the Middle East, and this is what they are trying to prevent from happening. The leverage that they have, they know it's not really that huge, given the massive influence of the Americans and the Americans' involvement in the airstrikes, but they are hoping to be able to convince all the parties to go back to the negotiating table, come up with a new agreement that could pave the way for more peace and stability for many years to come.
What about on Gaza, Hashem? We heard the American president at the NATO summit say that there could be an agreement soon on Gaza. Where do Europeans stand on that?
The Europeans are debating today the review of the association agreement with Israel. Many EU leaders said that they are now ready to trigger the clause that says that Israel has been in breach of its Article 2 agreement with the European Union. That landmark agreement that was signed in 2000 could now be suspended, and there is a momentum building towards that. We've just listened a while ago to the Irish Prime Minister Michael Martin and to the Spanish Prime Minister, to the Belgian Prime Minister, all saying that war must end now in Gaza. The blockade should come to an end and immediate aid should be allowed into the entire strip, and that there needs to be more diplomatic pressure put on Israel to immediately end the war in Gaza. There's been a divide because some countries say we should not really go that strong in our decisions as far as Israel is concerned. Many EU countries have massive backing for Israel, but at the same time, there is a push by human rights activists, trade unions, many governments that it's about time for two things: recognizing the Palestinian Authority and putting pressure and imposing sanctions on Israel.
A packed agenda for EU leaders there, no doubt. Hashem Ahelbara in Brussels, thank you very much for that. And that is it for this News Hour on Al Jazeera. Tom McRae will be with you in just a few minutes with more on that story and the others we're covering here on Al Jazeera. Thank you very much for watching. Bye for now.
How could over 2,000 babies simply disappear?
The babies were taken in the middle of the night without parents' consent.
It's a 70-year-old mystery that still haunts some Yemenite Jewish families in Israel.
This wasn't an accident. These weren't mistakes. This was a system.
Al Jazeera World hears disturbing allegations of state-sanctioned irregular adoptions. Israel, the Yemenite children affair on Al Jazeera.
We're facing a future that we don't understand, we can't predict fully.
Everyone here is stressed. Nobody knows what will happen. I need to stay positive.
I realized that I need to do more with my life.
I was like, you know what? I don't like myself. I want to change who I am. I want to be trustworthy. I want to be responsible.
People keep getting inspired through the stories of others.
Bringing the communities to consciously agree to put the past behind and move forward. Because all what we need is being able to move forward.
And that isn't just a matter of science. That's a matter of what do you think about your fellow human beings?
Because that is a matter of democracy.
As Israel's war on Gaza continues, Reframe takes you beyond the headlines of the conflict.
If you're not Jewish, you're not entitled to the same set of rights.
Award-winning author Fatima Bhutto meets renowned Palestinian human rights defender Omar Barghouti.
The whole young generation, they have centered Palestine as part of their identity as a generation that wants a different world.
Reframe on Al Jazeera.
Iran's Supreme Leader warns against any future attack, saying it delivered a hand slap to America's face. I'm Tom McRae, this is Al Jazeera live from Doha. Also coming up, Israeli forces target a school in Gaza housing displaced Palestinians, bringing the number of people killed to more than 20 since early on Thursday. Israeli settler attacks are increasing across the occupied West Bank. A Palestinian home is burned and 3 people are killed. Also this hour,
as the Republic of Kenya, we are done shedding blood because of power.
multiple deaths and arrests in Kenya after thousands mark the anniversary of last year's anti-government protests. Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei said Iran achieved total victory over Israel and the US exaggerated the impact of its strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities. Khamenei made the claims in his first speech since the US announced the ceasefire between Israel and Iran.
The United States immediately intervened and got involved in the war, simply for the reason that they have a firm conviction if they hadn't, the Zionist entity would be annihilated. That's why the United States harried in rescue and support of the Zionist entity. Yet they did not win any victory. They attacked our nuclear facilities, and this matter cannot go unpunished within the international venues. However, they failed to undermine these nuclear facilities. The United States President amplified their military operations, yet it later proved that they have been excessively exaggerating.
We're going to go to Rissel Sutter, who joins us from Tehran now. And strong words there from the Supreme Leader, saying the US achieved nothing from the conflict, saying Iran would never surrender.
Indeed, so this was his first speech after the announcement of the ceasefire since yesterday on. And indeed, many of Iranians were asking already about his whereabouts. And today he has released a video and addressing the nation. So his speech was focusing mainly on 4 points. First, about Iran's nuclear activities and nuclear program. He's saying that the statements that are coming from the United States are extremely exaggerated because the United States, including the President of the United States, claiming that they have completely destroyed Iran's nuclear program and nuclear facilities. But now Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader of Iran, is acknowledging that it has received a significant damage. However, saying that they failed to undermine Iran's nuclear program and saying that Iran's nuclear program is going to continue. And also says that these attacks on our nuclear facilities are not going to go unpunished. However, I was listening to him whether he's going to militarily threat Israel and the United States. He has used that Iran is going to employ international venues, means diplomatically Iran is going to deal with this matter. So the second focus of his speech was on the might of the Iranian armed forces. Many people globally and also domestically in Iran have seen that Iranian army has received a huge blow. Over 30 generals of Iranian army has been assassinated, killed by Israel. But now Iranian supreme leader is claiming that actually the armed forces have shown a heroic performance against Israel and Americans, and he's saying that if these attacks continue, the armed forces are capable of giving a proper response again. The third focus was on people's reaction. Many in Iran were questioning in such a hard time whether the Iranians, those who are among the opposition or those who are supporting the establishment here, will rally behind the Iranian flag or not. Now the supreme leader is saying that people across all spectrum, they have rallied behind the Iranian flag. And his fourth point was about the surrender. So you remember that famous tweet by the United States President Donald Trump saying complete surrender. Ali Khamenei, however, saying that Iran is deeply rooted in history, having a great the civilization, and he's saying that the word surrender doesn't exist among the vocabularies in our dictionary, and he said that this call on surrender is just being met a mockery among the Iranians toward the United States.
Rissel, thank you so much. Rissel Surda for us there in Tehran. At least 35 people have been killed in Israeli attacks in the Gaza Strip since early on Thursday. That includes several people who were waiting for food near these controversial distribution centres. Funerals are being held for some of the latest victims. While the war between Israel and Iran was going on, more than 900 Palestinians were killed in Gaza during the 12 days of the conflict. Another Israeli airstrike targeted a building housing displaced Palestinians in the Sheikh Radwan neighbourhood in Gaza City. The overnight attack killed 9 people. Ibrahim Al-Khalili is at the scene.
I'm right now standing inside Amr ibn al-As school in Sheikh Radwan neighbourhood in Gaza City. The Israeli military has targeted this school at midnight without any prior warning, which led to the death of many Palestinians, and dozens were injured and transported to Al-Shifa hospital. The scale of devastation inflicted to this classroom, which used to shelter tens of Palestinians, is unprecedented. We can clearly see the scale of destruction inflicted to this classroom after this brutal attack. After the Israeli-Iran war came to an end, the Israeli military escalated its attacks, targeting several areas across the Gaza Strip. We can also see the remnants of this missile which targeted this classroom. As you can see, these are the remnants of the missile here, which led to the death of many Palestinians who escaped their homes empty-handed, taking shelter here in Amr ibn al-As school. They ended up being targeted and brutally killed. We can see the personal belongings, the mattresses, wheelchair in this place. As you can see, the destruction inflicted to this classroom. The attack came at midnight without any sort of warning. The situation is getting much more dire in the light of the ongoing Israeli military escalation of attacks targeting different areas across Gaza Strip. Ibrahim Khalili, Al Jazeera, from Sheikh Radwan neighborhood, Gaza City, Palestine.
Well, two of the survivors in Sheikh Radwan described what happened.
We woke up in a panic to find out that they were all martyrs, all of them children. The neighboring classroom was full of children, and the one next to it too. All of them were children. We have no militants here, nothing at all. So why would they strike this place when it's full of children and women?
We were asleep when a sudden explosion shook everything. Stones flew in from all sides. People were shouting, "Martyrs!" We woke up terrified. The women and children were scattered. We couldn't find anyone. We barely got the martyrs out from under the tents. Then the ambulances came and started pulling out.
Well, Hani Mahmoud joins us from Gaza City now. And Hani, as we've been hearing, there have been drones circling overhead where you are pretty much all day. Can you just bring us up to speed with exactly what's been happening, where these attacks have been focused?
Well, Tom, yeah, drones are still hovering in the skies of the Gaza Strip at a very low level, causing intimidation, depriving people from the luxury of being outside in the street, let alone from being outside for necessities. A lot of people who are supposed to pick up aid from designated points now, as entry of trucks happened yesterday, are worried to go outside because, as we speak, a possible
It looks like we're having issues with Hani there, so we're going to try and come back to him a little bit later in the program. A funeral has been held for an Israeli soldier who was killed in Khan Yunis. He was one of 7 soldiers killed in 2 separate incidents in the southern Gaza Strip on Tuesday. And Israeli forces stormed the occupied West Bank city of Nablus early on Thursday, arresting at least 14 Palestinians. A journalist, Mujahid Tabanja, is among those who've been detained. He was arrested after Israeli forces stormed his home in Nablus. And in a separate incident in the occupied West Bank, Israeli settlers killed 3 Palestinians in an attack on the town of Kafr Malik near Ramallah. And a funeral has been held for a 13-year-old Palestinian boy who was killed during an Israeli military raid west of Jenin after being shot in the neck. Our correspondent Nida Ibrahim joins us once again on set. She's covered the occupied West Bank extensively for many, many years for us. Nida, can you just talk us through these settler attacks, which appear to be becoming more frequent and much, much more violent in recent times?
Yes, indeed. And if we talk about the period between January and the end of May, we're talking about at least 600 attacks by settlers against Palestinian communities. That's according to the UN figures. We are talking about, on average, 4 attacks per day against Palestinians. And yesterday night, that led to the killing of 3 Palestinians. We've seen very difficult images of Palestinians bidding farewell to their loved ones. One of them was injured in the leg, but he had to say goodbye to his brother who's been shot in the heart. And what these people's fault? They would tell you that they were trying to defend their village of Kafr Malik after dozens of Israeli settlers attacked the village, protected by the Israeli army. You know, the Israeli forces often accompany the Israeli settlers when they come and attack Palestinian villages. But not only that, they also offer protection to these settlers who are already armed, but they feel emboldened by the presence of the Israeli army. What also increases the danger for Palestinians is that these settlers do not face indictment, do not face prison time. It's very rare, Tom, that we hear that Israeli settlers have been convicted as a result of attacking Palestinians. This is why people say this is all systematic, and settler violence and settler attacks are just a tool to push Palestinians out of their lands, to get them to leave the lands where they've been living on for decades, but also to instill fear and intimidation amongst Palestinians. All of that is happening because the number of settlers keeps increasing and increasing in the occupied West Bank. So they feel like they have the upper hand. They have the Israeli military at their service when they want to attack Palestinian villages. So all of that is creating an environment where Palestinians are unarmed, really left alone by the world. And what the Israeli settlers are doing is not just taking lands, but instilling fear and making life for Palestinians more and more difficult, more and more dangerous. That the ultimate goal for them is to push Palestinians out of their lands and out of the occupied West Bank altogether.
Can you just sort of bring us up to date with these latest military raids in Nablus, including the detention of a journalist there as well?
Yes, Mujahid Tabanje, we've just received the news that he'd been released after he was detained from his home after Israeli forces raided Nablus, which is in the north of the occupied West Bank. This is part and parcel of being a journalist in the occupied West Bank, being arrested, being intimidated, being banned from traveling, and being shot, as we've seen, not only in Gaza and during this genocide and the journalists who have been killed, but also in the occupied West Bank, where in 2022 we lost our correspondent Shireen Abu Aqle while she was covering a raid in Jenin. This is part of reporting on and documenting the daily lives of Palestinians under the occupied West Bank. These military raids are averaging 40 per day. They are happening all across the occupied West Bank. They are usually including massive arrests, massive detention for hours, interrogation. Again, it's a reminder for Palestinians that the Israeli army is there, and should they really think about resisting their occupation, there would be a price, and it would be very, very heavy.
As we've seen time and time again. Thanks so much, Nita, as always. We really do appreciate it. OK, well, there's plenty still ahead here on Al Jazeera, including...
I'm Dominic Kane in eastern Germany, finding out just how effective the new government's border control policy really is.
Examining the headlines. Unflinching journalism. Sharing personal stories with a global audience. Explore an abundance of world-class programming on Al Jazeera.
Through centuries of expulsion and persecution, an ideology was formed that would appropriate Jewish identity, facilitate the creation of Israel, and frame it within the Western world order. In a three-part series, The Big Picture charts the rise of the ethno-religious state from an imperial proxy to an indispensable ally of the West, and examines how this alliance has granted the Zionist project global impunity. The Big Picture, How Israel Won the West, Part 1 on Al Jazeera. Haiti is in the grips of an unprecedented humanitarian crisis. As armed gangs and the state fight each other, the remaining medical staff are fighting against the total collapse of the few facilities still operational. Fault lines in beds with a team of doctors inside one of the last functioning trauma wards in the capital. The Last Lifeline on Al Jazeera.
You're watching Al Jazeera. A reminder of our top stories this hour. Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei has made his first public statement since a ceasefire was announced between Israel and Iran. He said US strikes on Iran's nuclear sites didn't achieve much and that the US exaggerated the impact of the attacks. Israeli forces have targeted a school in Gaza City, killing 9 displaced people. It brings the number of those killed since early Thursday to more than 30. And Israeli forces stormed the occupied West Bank of Nablus early on Thursday, arresting at least 14 Palestinians. The journalist is among those detained. Well, European leaders are meeting in Brussels for talks on a range of topics, including Iran and the war on Ukraine. The gathering follows Wednesday's NATO summit in The Hague, where leaders agreed to increase defence spending. An 18th round of sanctions against Russia is up for discussion. They'll also be talking about the war in Gaza and finding a unified position on US tariffs. Well, Hashim Al-Bara is in Brussels for us, joins us now. We heard from the Iranian Supreme Leader a short time ago. What are we expecting the EU leaders to potentially say in response?
Well, Tom, they're expected to talk about the Middle East in about 1 hour from now over lunch, and this is where they will spend some time talking, first of all, about Iran and then about Gaza. As far as Iran is concerned, we've heard a while ago the European Parliament President Roberta Metsola saying that she expressed concerns about the potential of spillover effect in the region if there is no permanent agreement. But she said at the same time that Iran must not acquire nuclear weapons and that this is something considered a red line, not only by the EU, but also by the international community. But she called on all the parties for restraint and figure out a way to move forward. And this is something that has been discussed widely within EU members who fear that the fragile ceasefire that prevails now could collapse, paving the way for more instability and more violence in the Middle East. What is it that they would like to achieve? They're hoping that the International Atomic Energy Agency will resume talks once again with the Iranians about the formalities of a new agreement that takes into account two things. First of all, the Iranians should forget about their nuclear program. Number two, they will find a way to come up with a consensus on what they can offer the Iranians. But ultimately, they understand that if there's going to be a breakthrough in the talks next week between the Iranians and the Americans, that also could be conducive to a new format, a new agreement that could pave the way for more peace and for stability.
And Hashim, we heard Donald Trump, the US president, say yesterday at the NATO summit that they were getting close to a deal on Gaza. Where do the EU leaders stand when it comes to the Gaza Strip and Israel's war?
They're pushing all for a new, tougher approach when it comes to Israel. They say that the war must stop immediately, the blockade must come to an end, and aid must be allowed into Gaza throughout the entire Strip. And they say at the same time that the review of the association agreement, particularly Article 2, is underway, with many countries saying that they are likely to trigger the Article 2 and say that Israel has been in violation of that Article 2, which could pave the way for the suspension of the landmark 2000 agreement between Israel and the EU.